hours. Please note that this meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after this meeting. Please note that we may have members of the public or press observing today's proceedings. Observers who are not participating, could I please ask you to keep your microphones and cameras switched off throughout? Could members of the local review body please leave their cameras on, but mute their microphone when they're not speaking? The local review body contains quasi-judicial business, so could members please remember not to leave the meeting during consideration of any of the reviews. This meeting has been convened in response to one request for a review of the decision that was taken by the appointed officer under the Council's scheme of delegation. Members of the local review body have before them copies of all the review documents as listed in the notice calling the meeting. So I now ask Ms. McBain, the Assistant Clerk, to outline the procedure to be followed in the conduct of these reviews and to take a roll call of the members present. Over to you, Ms. McBain.
Thank you, Chair. Members have the procedure note which was circulated with the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. The first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and by that it is meant without further information or representations. The regulations governing the local review process requires that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompanying the notice of review. The focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. The circumstances in which additional matters can be taken into account are set out in the legislation and will be addressed by the LRB's advisors where relevant. This review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the chairperson to consider the matter set out in the notice of review before you, and I would conclude by drawing your attention in particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. I'll just quickly note that everybody's here. So Councillor Gregg as chair.
Present.
Councillor Copeland.
Present.
Councillor Blake.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
And Councillor Thompson.
Present.
Thank you. So that's all 5 members. I'll hand back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Turning to consideration of the review in respect of a decision to refuse application for detailed planning permission for the change of use of a flat to short-term let accommodation sui generis with maximum occupancy of 4 people at 42 Elmfield Avenue, Aberdeen, planning reference 241060. We will now hear from the planning advisor in attendance. This is Ms. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I would like to point out that Ms. Green is attending today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance, and that's because she's here because she has not been involved in the earlier consideration of the application under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed development, and in effect her role will be the neutral one, involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. So over to you, Ms. Green. Thank you.
Thank you, members. I'll just share my presentation. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
So as mentioned, this review is into a planning application for change of use of a flat to a short-term let at 42 Elmfield Avenue. And the review was received within the 3 months, within the time period as required. The applicant has indicated on the notice of review that there are no new matters been raised in the review submissions. And in terms of procedure by which the review will be conducted, the applicant has expressed the view that the review may proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll now provide some background to the case before handing back to members to decide how to proceed. So this is the location plan. The site consists of a ground floor flat on Elmfield Avenue, just here. And this plan is just showing the outdoor areas. So the white areas are exclusively for the use of the ground floor flat. And then the yellow areas are shared, and the pink is for the upper floor flat. So the site's approximately 1 kilometre from the city centre and 400 metres from the edge of the university area. And this is an overhead photo taken from Google showing the property just there. And I've also got a street view showing the ground floor flat there. And that's the front door that would be used for access just into the ground floor flat. The upper floor flat is entered through a staircase up the side of the building. And this is the floor plan. So come in through the front door, the 2 bedrooms, a lounge, kitchen and bathroom, and then there's a door out to the back garden. That gives access onto the shared path, and then the area exclusively for this flat is just at the rear here. I just took this off Airbnb's website, just showing where there are other properties. I mean, obviously there could be some not on Airbnb, but this was just what their site was showing. And I can also show you, if members would like to see the plan for HMOs. So I can come back to that when I go through the policies. In terms of the information that's come in with the application, the checklist has the following information. So for occupancy, there would be a maximum of 4 guests in 2 bedrooms. Minimum length of stay would be 2 days, and maximum, there would be no maximum. There would be on-street parking available, although the property is within a controlled parking zone. The proposal permission is sought on a permanent basis. The property would be let to one single group. Check-in would be 2 or 3 p.m. and check-out by 10 a.m. Keys would be in a lockbox, or sometimes the guests would be met. Cleaning would be by a cleaning company after each stay. There's no shared communal access with other flats. The property has a dedicated garden area within a wider shared garden. There are no other communal areas in the property. There are no known other properties in the street within short-term let use, and there's no retrospective use. So the reasons for the decision, first of all, the use of the property as a short-term let would contribute to the loss of residential character in an area where there's already an existing level of harm from an over-provision of houses and multiple occupation. So the short-term let use would exacerbate the adverse impacts on the residential character of the surrounding area and the deficiency in community cohesion as a result of the loss of residential accommodation, with its use being instead by frequently changing transient visitors, and that it would therefore be contrary to Policy H1 on residential areas and Policy 30 on tourism uses within National Planning Framework 4. Second reason for refusal was that the presence of 4 unknown guests within the shared rear garden would adversely impact privacy and enjoyment of the otherwise private external amenity area for the neighbouring residents in the first floor flat, and due to the nature of it only being shared with one other property, and that would be therefore contrary to policy H1 residential areas in the local development plan. The applicant's case, it was stated that there are no objections from neighbours. In terms of the reference to HMOs, they state that short-term lets differ significantly in use in terms of the length of stays, and they state that short-term lets are less disruptive, have less impact on permanent residents. They state that there are no other short-term lets in the street and refer to a plan which I've just shown on the next slide. So I'll just show you that plan and then I'll come back to the rest of the list. So this is just pulled off our system. It shows the current application and then other applications for short-term lets within the surrounding area, and it's just making the point that there aren't any others in this street. So returning to the applicant's case, they point out the local benefits of short-term lets, supporting local businesses and the economy, and they state that it would balance the social concerns with ensuring that the area is economically vibrant. They submitted a title deed plan which was similar to was the plan that I showed you on the slide previously, showing the external areas in different colours, showing the area that's exclusive to number 42. They point out that there's no shared communal access. The flat has its own door, and there therefore wouldn't be disruption to others. And they state that the concern regarding noise and parties is no different to a permanent resident, with the owner of the short-term let being able to be more responsive to complaints, and also that any guests are temporary. So in terms of consultations, the waste team had no objections with guests using residential bins. In terms of roads, there was also no concern or objection with the parking requirements being the same as a mainstream residential use, and it was stated that the site's accessible via public transport nearby. It's within a controlled parking zone and there is parking available. There was no comment from Frog Hall, Powys and Sunnybank Community Council, and there were no representations. So at this point, I'll hand back to you, convener, and members to decide how to proceed. Wish to go on a site visit, etc.
Thank you very much for the information. As a local review body, we now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, remember that if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request that further written information is provided. Hearings can be arranged or a site visit can be undertaken. From my perspective, I believe that I do have sufficient information to make a decision, and I'll go around the room just to ask each member if they believe that they have sufficient information or if they wish to request more. So I'll start with Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, I agree with you, convener. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blake.
Yes, I believe we've got sufficient information.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark.
I believe we've got sufficient information.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Thompson.
I also believe that we have sufficient information. Thank you.
Grant. Okay, thank you for that. As members feel that they have sufficient information, we will now hear from Ms. Green on the relevant policies and considerations for this review. Over to you, Ms. Green.
Thanks. Right. Let me move on to the policies. These are the relevant policies from National Planning Framework 4. I've just highlighted policy 30 there as it was used in the reason for refusal. So as members will be aware, policies 1, 2 and 3 are relevant to all applications, and in considering these, members may wish to note that this is an application for change of use only, and that therefore the likely magnitude of any impact. All decisions should obviously give significant weight to the climate and nature crisis and climate mitigation and contribute to the enhancement of biodiversity. Policy 13 states that developments should be accessible by public transport and active travel. And I'll just move on to the next slide for policy 30. So the highlighted section here is the one that was used as the reason for refusal, but I'll just mention section B as well, which states that proposals for tourism related development will take into account the contribution made to the local economy, compatibility with surrounding area in terms of the nature and scale of the activity and impact of increased visitors, the impact on communities, for example, by hindering the provision of homes and services for local people, opportunities for sustainable travel, management of parking and scope for sustaining public transport, accessibility for disabled people, measures taken to minimise carbon emissions, and opportunities to provide access to the natural environment. And then section E, which states that development proposals for short-term lets will not be supported where the proposal would result in an unacceptable impact on local amenity or the character of a neighbourhood or area, or the loss of residential accommodation where such loss is not outweighed by demonstrable local economic benefits. Policies from the local development plan. The site zoned within a residential area, and policy H1 was used as part of the reason for refusal by the case officer. So I'll cover policy H1 and VC2, the tourism policy, on the next slide. Policy 8 here relates to HMOs only. And says that they should not result in significant adverse impact on residential amenity, traffic safety, active travel or demand for car parking. And it says that proposals will be assessed in terms of excessive concentration. Obviously it's not used as a reason for refusal because it relates to HMOs, but it's referred to by the case officer in the report because of the concentration of HMOs in the area. Policy R5, oops, let's go back to the slide, on waste management. It requires new developments to have in place suitable waste storage areas. Policy VC2 I'll cover in a moment, and policies T2 and T3 relate to, they're similar to the policies in NPF 4, stating that developments should be accessible by active travel and adequate car parking be provided. And then the APG on short-term lets, it covers when permission is needed and the information that needed in order to assess the amenity impacts of the proposals, and details of all those factors have been provided with the application. So the section of policy H1 that's relevant is this one. Within existing residential areas, proposals for non-residential uses will be supported if they are considered complementary to residential use, or it can be demonstrated that there would be no conflict with or nuisance to residential amenity. And then policy VC2 states that proposals for new facilities capable of strengthening the appeal and attraction of Aberdeen to a wide range of visitors will be supported, and proposals should complement existing visitor facilities and be sequentially located in the city centre, unless there are particular reasons otherwise. So the next slide relates to the Scottish Government's publication on short-term lets, and it states that they make an important contribution to the economy by providing visitors with a unique tourist experience through a host's local knowledge. They can offer accommodation in places not served by hotels and hostels. They can offer affordable accommodation, helping attract tourists on a lower budget, and they can provide additional capacity at times like special events. And then the Scottish Government research finding found that the most common positive impact of short-term lets is local economic impact associated with tourism. Also of relevance is Circular 1 of 2023, and this refers to Policy 30 from NPF4 that I noted in a previous slide. It states that this must be balanced against wider policy objectives, and that planning authorities may grant permission for a limited time. So a reminder of the primacy of the development plan, with all applications to be determined in accordance with the plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, and each application treated on its merits. So the basis for this particular decision is impact on amenity in terms of Policy H1 and residential areas and Policy 30 on tourism. The appropriateness of the location for a short-term let in terms of the impact on the character of the area and the impact on local economy. So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan as a whole, or are there material considerations weighing for or against? I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that information. So we come to question time. Could I ask a question first, please, relating to the LDP policy R5 on waste management? If this proposal had been recommended for approval, would there have been a requirement or a condition for a waste contract arrangement to be included?
No, there wouldn't be a requirement for a condition. The waste team have stated that the short-term let can use the residential bins, and then because it's a business not paying council tax, which isn't really a planning issue, but they would then enter into a contract with that business to make a payment for the commercial bin.
Right, okay, thanks for that clarity. So questions? Any questions? Okay. We have, Councillor Copeland.
Sorry, thank you, Convener. Just to confirm, Ms Green, there's been no objections from the upstairs neighbour, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and sorry, Convener. Secondly, there's no parking restrictions in that street at all, and there's no permits required, is that right?
It's a controlled parking zone. I assume what's meant by parking available is if people pay.
Is that street actually in the parking zone? Because it
That's,
said in the report that there was on-street parking available. And it
yes.
says elsewhere that nearby streets are controlled, but is that street actually controlled? Because it doesn't mention anything about a parking permit.
No, I took from that it would be, if people paid, it would be available. Let me just double check what the roads comments say, because I thought they said it was in a controlled parking zone, but just a moment. Yes, apologies. It does say inner city boundary. It's not in a CPZ, but bounded by zones.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, then we can move on to decision time. In accordance with the procedure note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. So at this point, we should be articulating our own decisions in respect of the application and state for the minute the grounds for that decision, referring to planning policy where appropriate. So starting with myself, I am content with the officer decision. I think that the NPF policy 30 has been applied appropriately, and I think that the H1 residential amenity policy from the local development plan is also applied appropriately. I'm willing to go into more detail, but it might be worthwhile just going round first of all to find out the decisions of all members. I'm basically supporting the officer recommendation as it stands. So I'll go around the room and ask you what your decision is, starting with Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, convener. I am somewhat divided on this one. The fact that the immediate neighbour has not objected when the questions about privacy of the rear garden were mentioned, but as I said, the neighbour hasn't objected. The commercial waste being done by the council in the normal bins with a contract means there's no adverse effect, impact environmentally, like there's not an extra waste wagon coming down the street or things. And we have a high density of HMOs, but HMOs are different to short-term lets. As such, I really am swayed either way, but on reflection, I think I would support the officers in this one.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'll turn to Councillor Blake for your decision.
Thank you, convener. I'm a bit like Councillor Copeland, actually. I can see both sides of this, but I would say I'm actually inclined the other way than Councillor Copeland, to go against officer recommendations regarding this. And this was largely in relation to policy VC2 tourism and culture and policy 30 tourism. I think short-term lets are different from HMOs, and short-term lets do make a difference to the tourism economy of the city and the northeast, and will benefit local economy in that particular area. I don't think there's an over provision of short-term lets in that area, and I would be inclined to go with approval for it.
Okay, thank you. Then moving on to Councillor Clark.
Thank you, convener. I am really divided like everyone else in this. I can see the fors, I can see the against. There is HMOs in the area. I know this is not an HMO, it's a short-term let, which is totally different. I would support officers in this purely because there doesn't seem to have been, the community council hasn't had an opinion. If they have, they haven't said anything. I'm actually quite divided. I'm worried that there's a house above there's a shared facility around the back. So I'm agreeing with officers' recommendations.
You're agreeing with officers to
Yes.
refuse?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Okay, Thanks for that, Councillor Clark. Then Councillor Thompson, what's your decision on this?
Thank you, convener. I'm minded to support officer's decision. My main reasons are around, as Councillor Clark's just mentioned, the privacy issue in the back garden, and I think we cannot take the absence of a complaint or of a representation from the upstairs neighbours as being a sort of a wholehearted approval of this going forward. But my main reason is that although there are only a few short-term lets in the area, there are a lot of HMOs, and certainly local residents in the past have expressed their concerns about the loss of community cohesion in the area. And I think that under policy H1 in the LDP, I do think this would add to that fear of the loss of community cohesion. So, as I mentioned, I would be going with officers' recommendations on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. McBain, do we have sufficient information to finalise this?
Yes, thanks, Chair. So I've noted that the application will be refused 4 votes to 1, and it'll be with the reasons stated by the original officer.
Okay, thank you very much. The local review body has agreed, but by majority, to uphold the decision of the appointed officer, and the application is therefore refused. So I understand that a decision note will be issued from today's meeting to the applicant or to the agent in the near future.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's our business for the meeting concluded.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for taking part.
Thank
Many
you.
thanks. Okay.
I'll just stop the recording.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.